Hello everyone, and welcome to another exploration video where I explore and showcase game locations while talking about lore and anything else of interest. In this video, we'll take a deep dive into the Capital Wasteland in Fallout 3, where I'll be taking you into one of the mysterious underground vaults to uncover what hidden truths lie within. To make this journey more easy, I've cleared out most enemies and completed many of the tasks ahead of time so that we can enjoy these virtual tours unimpeded. Whether you're a Fallout fan retracing this journey with me, or new to the game, you'll learn the stories that these places have to tell as I go room to room and floor by floor to uncover the sinister events that unfolded for the victims of Vault 92. We'll have a brief look first at the local map on the Pip-Boy. Starting at the northern point of this location, the area consists of the vault entrance, several power generator rooms, and the Atrium, with various markers that denote other locations separated by a loading screen. We'll move through the level in the direction I'm currently hovering the reticle, before making our way toward the Overseer's office in the far south. So we begin our journey inside of a small cave passage that leads toward the vault entrance. The ground is littered with empty food cans and drink bottles. It's not uncommon for people from the outside world to find these passages to the vaults and try to get in, but whether it's with good or bad intentions, everyone is always turned away, usually by being ignored. Perhaps the food supply that was carried in these crates was a failed bargaining tool to trade their way inside. Following the trail of cans a short distance, we'll find something amiss. The vault door is wide open. As we move further into the entrance room, the area appears to be a complete mess, with papers strewn everywhere. It's unknown for exactly how long this vault has been in such a state of disrepair, but initial observations tell us it might have been decades. Metal shelves block access to the small adjoining control room, and the vault door access switch is further on that was used to open it, only no one seemed to have tried to close it again. There are chairs thrown aside, with a line of broken computer terminals nearby. On one of these tables is the first of 6 holotapes that were recorded by a Professor Malleus, which we'll listen to in a moment. Before that, we'll enter the first power generator room and reveal as an example what the player would normally have to encounter throughout this floor. So these flying creatures, called bloatflies, have made their way into the vault and have spread across this whole level. Their presence here only becomes further evidence that there is no one left in the vault to deal with these pests. But as we move deeper into this place, we'll be able to learn what happened when we piece together the information from the holotapes, personal notes, and diaries from the computer terminals. Inside the first of 3 rooms that have power generators, this being the central one, we can see that some of them are still working. They act as a secondary power source for the vault, and appears to be the reason there's electricity still powering this whole place, like the lights and computer terminals to the electronic doors. The vault's primary power source, from the reactor room we'll go to later, is damaged beyond repair. We'll now head westward, And as I've already stepped on a frag mine when entering this room, note that there are many of these human-made traps that will be found throughout the vault that only deepens the mystery of what happened here. This is the first of several utility passages we'll move through that is normally meant to carry electricity lines as well as water and steam pipes to various parts of the vault. And for one last time, I'll show another example of these mutated bloatflies before we continue our exploration. They're the descendants of the common housefly that, like with many other living things, have mutated due to nuclear radiation from the Great War. When looking around the West Generator room, like with the rest of the vault, it appears to be in an advanced state of deterioration, with piles of rubble found everywhere. While we scan the rest of the area, let's play Professor Malleus's first audio log.
So far, the experiment is going exactly as planned. We're subjecting the residents to extremely low-frequency white noise in regular intervals through the loudspeaker system. Using these soundproof recording studios and the musicians was an inspired idea. Kudos to the Vault-Tec Selection Committee on their shrewdness.
So there are a few things mentioned here, such as white noise, an experiment, and musicians, that give us the first clues as to what happened here, and will be something further discussed as we move deeper into the vault. But for now, we'll reach the end of this area and double back to the very first generator room so that we can make our way eastward. This passage has a set of stairs that goes towards the living quarters, which is separated by the game's loading screen. The order in which I've chosen to explore these locations is based on the numbered holotapes found from Malleus's audio logs. While we head toward the East Generator room and beyond, I'll briefly talk about Vault-Tec, as Malleus has already name-dropped them in the audio recording. So Vault-Tec Corporation was once a mega-corporation responsible for the construction of the vaults that was spread across the entire country and funded by the US government. They were to become large fallout shelters to house many selected civilian families in the event of a nuclear war, and governed by a vault overseer. Many years later, the vault doors were expected to open so that the descendants of the original families would be able to return to the surface and repopulate the country. But in reality, Vault-Tec had no care for the human lives they had helped to fill their fallout shelters with. They only cared about financial gain. To this end, Vault-Tec performed human experiments on many of the vault's residents without their knowledge, with the overseers usually involved in the conspiracy to ensure the experiments were a success. However, Vault-Tec Corporation perished in the fires of the nuclear war, leaving the vault overseers isolated and solely responsible for the continuation of the experiments. So this is the last room, before we again double back to the first generator room, and this place appears to be a dilapidated clinic. We'll now go through the door that leads toward the atrium. This place, that I'll dub as the ante-room, is almost empty of anything to see other than a table and some shelves, one of which has been positioned so that a rigged shotgun can rest on top of it, pointing toward the door that we need to go through, and right in front of the door is the tripwire that was set off the shotgun. It's as if it's designed to keep people in, rather than defend them from outside threats. At the top of the stairs is a skeleton next to a box and a note. It's a secret message written by hand to be passed on to others once read. It mentions hacking terminals and using the noise flush to spook the crazies, while the group organises to make an escape attempt out of the vaults, but judging by the skeleton, some appear to have been killed in that attempt. Walking into the atrium, we can find several more skeletons with bloodstains seen everywhere. The tables have been flipped onto its side, acting as a defensive barrier, and all facing toward the passageway leading to the living quarters. Some of the electronic doors have been ripped away from their frames, and there's more evidence of the vault's state of deterioration seen here. This main hall has also been infested with more bloatflies, as the original vault dwellers have all died a long time ago. As we circle the rest of the room, I'll take a moment to give some context to this place. So Vault 92 is a Vault-Tec fallout shelter located in the northeast region of the Capital Wasteland, near the town of Old Olney. The world's very best musicians were selected to live here during the time of the Great War, in order to preserve its musical talents. The construction of Vault 92 started in 2062 and was completed in 2068. It would become the new home for over 200 people for the next century, when after that time, the vault door was scheduled to reopen for their descendants to safely leave for the surface. And during their stay here, these musicians were provided with recording equipment and musical instruments, so that they could continue and preserve a musical legacy for mankind's future generations. But as we already know, this vault was one of many used by Vault-Tec for their insidious experiments. This room, like many of the others, has very little in the way of furniture, perhaps due to the outbreak of fighting between the groups. Many of these items had been repurposed for their barricades. This is the observation window of the Overseer's office, and will be the next location we'll head over to after our exploration of the atrium is complete. The last room on this floor is the clinic. It has a couple of gurneys and some lockers, with very little else of worthy note to mention. So we'll now make our way to the atrium's upper level. passing by plenty more debris and more bodies of bloatflies. The structural layout of many of these vaults are generally the same. The Atrium is designed as the hub that links various other locations together, with the Overseer's window always overlooking the Atrium. The first of these upper floor rooms is empty, so we'll have a quick scan of this place before moving on. Over the walkway, there's a supply shop. Though many of the shelves have been cleared out, this room appears relatively untouched. And on the shop counter, there's a computer terminal with some readable entries. They're from the shop proprietor. One of these entries is a message to the Overseer, expressing his frustration that the Overseer continues to ignore his requests to supply personal audio listening devices and headphones to the residents so that they can enjoy listening back to their own musical recordings in the comfort of their own rooms, rather than having to go all the way to the studio rooms to do so. The last message reveals a deal being made by the proprietor with another person. Supplies in exchange for a weapon. He also mentions that things are getting worse, as almost half of the vault's residents are going crazy. As we are now approaching the Overseer's office, I'll pull up the map again to show this new area. The corridor we're in will lead to the office we want to go to, with 3 bedrooms off to the side to visit along the way. Right at the start of this area, there are more skeletons on the floor, and blood on the walls and door behind us. Nearby, there's a skeleton that has been crushed underneath the now broken door. Beyond there might have possibly been the Overseer's sleeping quarters. In the wider passage, there are more makeshift barricades that have been placed as a last line of defense for the Overseer, and the guards who stood their ground behind them may have been responsible for gunning down some of the dwellers in the starting passage. As for the 3 nearby bedrooms, they seem to be guard quarters. Each have single beds, lockers, empty shelves, and desks with broken terminals. There are also 2 more of Professor Malleus's holotapes that can be found in this area that can give us further insight into what's been happening in Vault 92.
I'm a bit encouraged by the latest batch of data. It seems that 33% of the subjects are now lapsing into a trance-like state on occasion. When in this state, we're fairly certain that suggestion and programming of the subject can be applied. We've begun testing this by implanting subtle cues in affected subjects, making them scratch their ear or constantly fix their hair. So far, I'm happy to report a 100% success rate on this implementation method.
Though Malleus was happy with these results, things begin to take a turn for the worse when listening to audio log 3.
Disaster today. one of our test subjects, V920717, has murdered 3 other residents in a fit of unbridled rage, the likes of which I've never seen. It took almost 23 shots before the security team took him down. This subject has no history of violence or mental instability whatsoever. My concern is that this subject is one of our most successful implant recipients, able to execute complex instructions during a trance state.
Following the passage around some corners, we finally make our way into the Overseer's office. It has the observation window at the far end of the room, and a semicircular desk in the centre. But it's the smaller desk nearby, with Overseer Rubin's computer on it, that is of particular interest, as his personal entries can be read that goes into some detail about the Vault experiments using white noise. These revelations will be something that I'll talk about a bit later once we enter the living quarters, so we'll wrap up our time here by looking at the rest of the room. Besides what's been mentioned, there are shelves that have been emptied a long time ago, structural debris on the floor, broken CCTV screens behind the main desk that Rubin used to monitor the Vault residents, and several working computer banks either side of the circular window. Now entering the living quarters from the direction of the west generator room, this location is split between the upper level that has the residents' dormitories and recreational rooms, and the lower level to the south that has the Vault's laboratory. Before starting the exploration, we'll briefly encounter a new enemy type called Mirelurks that have found their way into the Vault's lower levels due to the structural damages, and this would be the perfect opportunity to use the noise flush to destroy the creature's brains, effectively killing every Mirelurk in the living quarters. Like everywhere else, this area shows signs of aging. Debris and litter cover the floors, and walls are crumbling, while the metal vents and utility pipes have rusted, letting out a continuous flow of steam. Before we enter any of the nearby rooms, I'll complete the walk around in this direction first, so you can see this place in its entirety. This door to the Atrium is the one that the skeletons and the bloody barricades were facing towards inside the main hall. And this passage only leads to a dead end, with these windows looking into the dining area. This security terminal was used originally by the Vault guards, and were the only ones who had access to it, and apart from the noise flush, the other options are only broken intercom connections to other parts of the Vault. So we'll enter the women's dorms, first passing through what used to be the females' recreational area, with broken computers and empty shelves that was once filled with books. The bunk room is a mess, with beds and lockers tipped over, caused by the fighting between the normal Vault residents and those affected by the white noise experiments. Off to one side is the storage room. and at the other end of the bunk room is the toilets with smashed mirrors on the walls. Opening each of the cubicle doors reveals nothing, but one of the saddest discoveries found in the vault can be found here. Lying in the corner is a child's skeleton with their teddy bear, who was likely trying to hide from the fighting. While leaving the room, note that there are some loudspeakers directly above the dorm entrance. Directly opposite both of the dorms is the main recreational room. This place is almost empty, apart from a few things, including the pool table, and was an important social gathering spot for men and women to get away from their work for a short time. And the adjoining dining room is almost bare, with its windows looking back into the passage we were previously in. Now we'll cross over to the men's dorms. There's another security terminal that can activate the noise flush. Looking back down the passage, we can find the door we started by for this area, and you can just about see the pair of loudspeakers that have been placed above the doorway. The layout for the men's area is the same, first passing through the recreational area to get to the bunk room, which in turn links to both a storage room and the toilets. Once again, these rooms appear to be in such a state to suggest fighting had taken place here. First heading into the male toilets, there are more smashed mirrors, and cubicle doors have been torn off their hinges. There's a skeleton lying next to the beds, and another is found at the back of the storage room holding a weapon, with a rigged shotgun set up on a nearby shelf. According to the note next to the skeleton, this person locked himself in, stating that he didn't go crazy like the others and decided to go out on his own terms. So the information on Overseer Rubin's computer terminal revealed Vault-Tech's true goals. The company ordered the Overseer to initiate a project called White Noise Mind Suggestion Combat Experimentation. The idea behind these tests was to use white noise to create the perfect soldiers who could withstand pain in battle and never disobey a direct order from high command. The initial tests carried out on the musicians while they were in the sound booths was a success, as the dwellers remained oblivious to the subliminal suggestions being implanted in their minds. The success of these tests encouraged Rubin to go even further. Without Malleus's knowledge, Rubin ordered some of the professor's assistants to secretly extend the reach of the white noise by wiring it into the living quarters as loudspeakers so that everyone was subjected to it while they slept. The experiments ultimately failed, however, as the white noise eventually caused many of the vault dwellers to go insane, possibly due to being subjected to the white noise for longer periods of time. They became aggressive and began to kill each other using their bare hands. As we enter this passage, there are two skeletons on the ground, presumably crazies that attempted to raid the area before security forces put them down. This lower level is the laboratory, referred to as Section 4. It's a restricted location for Professor Malleus and his assistants to conduct their white noise experiments on the vault residents as instructed by the Overseer. Off to one side is the security room that controls access to the lab. The computer can set off the white noise, open and close the doors, and deploy countermeasures, which explains the skeletons found in the passage. They were locked in and incinerated. While looking around the central room, I'll play Malleus's fourth audio log that's found in this area.
Unbelievable! We've had 12 more incidents in the past month mirroring Subject V920717's actions. The shocking part is the savagery these aberrants exhibit when they murder. They rip their victims apart limb from limb and eviscerate them by hand. These used to be respected members of the musical community. How could this be happening? Where have I gone wrong?
In this next room, it appears to be the working space for the lab assistants, and there's even a pair of loudspeakers resting on one of the tables that was being tinkered with as a means to release the white noise on the residents while they slept, which was something that Malleus was not aware of, believing that the tests were only to be done in the sound booths. The next room over is the data storage room that's been collecting and analysing the results from the white noise project. It also appears to be used as an equipment storage room. As we circle the area, there are several metal shelves and lockers amongst some retro-looking data machines. What's unclear is whether or not the Vault residents were even aware of Malleus and his team at all, and if they were, did Malleus and the rest of Section 4 act like fellow Vault musicians, pretending to be from another part of the Vault? What is clear is the actual size of Vault 92 would have realistically been a lot more bigger for a population of over 200 people and extend far beyond what we see in Fallout 3. But like with all the vaults, the game simplifies it with a much more scaled down version of one. And the last research room has a couple of gurneys for performing the autopsies on those that were killed after turning insane. And the lab terminal has more entries made by Malleus. It mentions Rubin no longer replying to Malleus's concerns over the residents' declining state of mind, and he even suggests the idea of leaving the vault along with the remaining survivors. Now we enter the sound testing area from the direction of the East Generator Room. This completed map reveals the location where the residents worked on their music. The upper level has the classrooms, while the lower level has the recording studio. The corridor wraps around the central classrooms, with this level also infested with Mirelurks. Where these creatures came from and how they managed to make it so far into the vault will be discovered later, but had the vault dwellers still been around when the Mirelurks appeared, it would have resulted with the deaths of everyone, as the creatures are ferocious and would have likely overwhelmed the vault population. Heading first into the northern room, there are 2 counters and a set of shelves either side of the entrance, where the residents collected and returned their musical instruments. Until we get to the sound studio, there'll also be a lack of human skeletons to find anywhere on this floor. This suggests that most of the fighting took place in the living quarters, due to the loudspeakers subjecting that area with the white noise, where the crazies eventually went into the direction of the Atrium instead of here. And the room further on is the equipment storage area. This place is more of a mess, with its shelves tipped over in one corner, and many of its equipment is gone, perhaps taken by the remaining sane residents who tried to make their daring escape. Now we'll follow the corridor clockwise, going into any adjoining rooms along the way. In the eastern area, there are 2 rooms. Entering the first one has more shelves and tables, possibly a place to rest and socialize. While the back room appears to be another data storage room for all the music they produce, and there's a computer terminal that has the personal entries of one of the female residents, starting out hopeful, expressing her happiness to be making music amongst the most talented people in the world, even hinting toward a romantic interest with one of the male vault dwellers. But the diary goes on to mention her becoming unwell, believing she may be spending too much time in the sound studio, and is struggling to even type this diary entry. Her final message is barely legible, realizing that she's losing her mind. She pleads for help, and rants about getting the noises out of her head. In the classroom, there's a working projector and a board for music lessons. There's also a line of lockers at one end of the area, and a bunch of desks and chairs have been shoved aside, making space in the middle of the room. A possible theory was that this was the place where the surviving dwellers planned how to exit Vault 92, while the crazies and the Overseer's security fought between each other. While the adjoining room appears to be a place for them to practice with their instruments. It has a group of chairs, each placed behind some music stands, and observation windows for their peers to be able to view their performances. Unlike the living quarters, this floor doesn't have a terminal to use the white noise on the creatures, so the Mirelurks had to be dealt with before we did this walk around. Following the corridor around, there's a small room in the south with a door that is jammed shut by a shelving unit and cannot be entered. So while we move through the passage, I'll play the last 2 holotapes.
The situation is getting out of hand. Over half the population of the vault is exhibiting savage tendencies. I can only assume our noise experimentation has awakened some dormant part of their psyche, brought their primitive nature to the surface. In essence, I feel that they are almost psychologically devolving. I was stupid for rushing these experiments. And now over 35 people are dead. I can't believe what I've discovered. Just before he died, one of the security team members told me everything. The Overseer has been implanting these murderous intentions in the entire vault population without my knowledge. Using the loudspeakers in the dorms instead of just the studios, he subjected everyone to the white noise as they slept. He then implanted combat suggestions he claims came from Vault-Tec itself. He must be completely insane. No observation, no controls. I'm going to have to confront him now and make him pay for what he's done. Half the vault is dead. The other half, fighting for its life. Good luck to all of us. And may God have mercy on our souls.
Malleus saw the entire project as a failure and went to confront the Overseer, but Rubin had already ordered Vault security to kill Malleus, believing that the professor was inciting an insurrection amongst the surviving residents. This group armed themselves and tried to escape the vault, which resulted in security setting up the traps at the entrance to keep them all inside, all the while trying to fight off the crazies. In the lower level, there are 4 rooms to go into, starting in the room north. As we explore these areas, it appears to be the least affected. Both the cafeteria and storage rooms look intact with no objects moved out of place. And going to the right here will take us to the storage room. Heading to the sound studio, which is split into 2 rooms, we'll take the left path first into the control room. This area has a working computer terminal that has several entries made by the studio supervisor. He mentions his interest in a female musician who shares the same feelings, while in another entry he states that there's a strange noise interfering with the sound equipment, which unbeknown to him was Malleus and his team conducting the white noise experiments on the musicians in the other room. By the entrance of the recording room is a former resident with a weapon. And as we enter the area, there are 2 more skeletons found amongst the chairs. And the last completed map to explore is the Reactor Room. This area can be entered from the doors either in the east or west generator rooms. So this area is a simple layout, starting from one end and following a linear path to the other side. And as mentioned earlier, the reactor level was the vault's primary power source. However, the residents had moved on from the vault, whether killed or escaped, long before this place lost much of its power. This area is where the Mirelurks managed to make their way inside of the vault, as the reactor room had flooded with radioactive water. Mirelurks are mutated crustaceans that reside in many parts of what was once the Potomac River in the Capital Wasteland. They have a strong outer shell that can withstand weapons, and usually follow a Mirelurk king. The chamber we're about to enter is one of several control rooms where vault operators would monitor and control all aspects of the reactor's operations. There are a number of advanced computer systems along the wall, and smaller control consoles nearby. This is one of the walls that broke apart, letting in the water, followed by the Mirelurks. In the next control room, there's a busted generator, along with some more retro-style data machines and 2 more control consoles that have all become damaged by the flooding. Here, there's a computer terminal with several engineering logs. Some of these are just maintenance works around the vault, including a security upgrade in Section 4, but this entry has been mysteriously overwritten. The most relevant entry, however, mentions the engineers' concerns about the stress fractures and water seepage coming from parts of the walls, concluding that there may be an adjoining underground spring or lake that is putting pressure on the concrete walls. But with the horrific events that transpired, the vault was uninhabited for many years, and no one was left to repair the walls when they gave way, leaving the Mirelurks to enter unchallenged. So I'll now finish up this exploration video by heading for the stairs that will lead us back up toward the entrance. In conclusion, the fates of both Overseer Rubin and Professor Malleus remain unknown, though it's likely they were killed in the vault. As for some of the vault survivors, they managed to open the vault door and escape, starting a new life on the surface.